ayuda con la presentación.
We'll start with the second panel, China and Latin America in approaches and direction for a growing cooperation. Now it's the turn of Professor Ricardo Martínez from the University of Costa Rica. And we'll talk about playing with identities, Chinese immigrants in Costa Rica.
Well, thank you very much to the students and authorities for the invitation, to everybody for here wants to hear me. Special thanks to Paulo for the whole work for this activity. Well, I will present to you maybe the most exotic and tropical topic in this conference. I call this paper, this research, Playing with Identities, the National Stadium and the Chinatown of San Jose in Restoration Relations between China and Costa Rica. In the beginning of the last year, one member of the Congress of Costa Rica, Congress, tweeted the next words. I will read you in Spanish because I think it's important to hear the meaning. Él escribió, la translation there. La construcción del estadio nos dejó en Costa Rica unos cuantos chinitos. Faltan los de la escuela de policía, que estaban construyendo, y los de la ruta 32, que también estaban construyendo. After these words, the Costa Rican Chinese community had big reaction against him, the press, scholars, etc. All the country was like, what? What are you saying? That's very racist about the Chinese people. It's a very important integrant of the Costa Rican society. So, the next day, he, in an interview, said that. I read this Spanish. Porque a veces se ha dado de una persona que tiene un súper pequeño, una pequeña tienda de abarrotes. Viene un chino y le pone un súper a la par. Y claro, que lo llena de abarrotes. Tengo el testimonio de un caso de un señor que hizo frente todo lo posible para competir con el chino que lo puso a la par. Pero entonces, el chino le puso 2 establecimientos más y adiós, tome. Es una realidad, no se puede tapar el sol con un dedo. Pero siento yo que no lo hice peyorativamente. He said that after the Chinese Costa Rican community reaction. No es ninguna ofensa. Es un llamado de atención a la banca para que apoye al pequeño y mediano empresario, pero también a la unión de cámaras, para que entre ellos se apoyen, porque si algo tiene la comunidad china es que son muy solidarios. You can hear the contradictions in the discourse of this guy about the Chinese community in the Costa Rican society. And he finished that interview with this phrase. Next, please. La gente no quiere ver, pero ahí están, the Chinese people. Y como a manera de excusa, like trying to excuse him, he said, y conste que me gusta la comida china. In the current global context, there has been a return to the right and the formation of new neoliberalism. In February 2017, the conservative member of the Costa Rican Congress and evangelical pastor Avelino Esquivel Quesada, with the previous words, referred to the Chinese in Costa Rica and explained himself an interview in response to the request for apology by the community of Costa Rican descendants of Chinese immigrants for his xenophobic comments. It is interesting to highlight an issue that is seen in the and continues to be a reality in Costa Rican social imaginary. The conception of people with Asian phenotypic traits and the Chinese as an other in Costa Rica. Despite being people born in the country and, like much of the population, culturally, ticos, gentilicio, and far away from the Chinese. This conflict of identities and races is understood in the construction process of the Costa Rican nation for the 19th century. The invention of national identity in Costa Rica is intimately linked to the country relations with Chinese immigrants, and therefore China itself. In the game of identities, the Costa Rican cultural subject was constructed differentiating itself from the other, be it Central America, indigenous, black people, gypsy people, Arabic, or Chinese. In the case of the latter ethnic group, its social insertion through the participation of economic networks and associative practice overcame the state policies of control and marginalization in the first half of the 20th century. Decades after this event, the gains of identities in China-Costa Rican or Tico-Sino-Tico relations returned with the reestablishment of diplomatic dynamics between the two countries. Soon began the construction of a new national state in Costa Rica, financed entirely by China, to which the Central American country responded through the municipality of San Jose with a Chinatown project in the capital city. The former project functions as a symbol par excellence of contemporary national identities and the ladder of the historical identities of overseas Chinese. In Costa Rica, the national identity of feeding on the heroes of the homeland and some political symbols came to be because of sporting achievements, especially football. And the identity of Chinatown as social historical construct of spontaneous generations arising from immigration in search of survival and new life opportunities in Costa Rica simply never happened. The first type of identity is conceived from above, political power, while the second flows from below, culture. So how do you embed a Chinatown in the 21st century? In this identity game, to what extent do these short-term infrastructure projects materialize downwards from above? That is like my main questions in this paper, Problematica. Next. Before. Sorry. There. The construction of the Costa Rican national state was characterized by the adoption of European institutions, the appropriation of liberal and aided ideals, and the promotion of electoral practice, a process in which the various elites of civil power were always aware of the state's need to be united with the Catholic Church. Consequently, from very early times, the state acquired a confessional character until today, often aligning itself with Vatican policies and the interests of these institutions. The situation is highlighted by foreigners who have been rejected in their country, especially when Catholicism is absent in the case of Chinese immigrants. In 1848, the Republic of Costa Rica was proclaimed with the municipalities led by the municipality of San Jose. In addition, national days were established that year, and national symbols were created with at least sufficient elements to mark a national identity outside its borders, without forgetting that the modern ideals of the nation coexist with those of the Catholic religion. The next step was to define what or who is Costa Rican and why they are Costa Ricans. In this sense, the choice of cultural and phenotypic characteristics for the magnitude of national identity began. The same happened with the rest of Latin America. The ideal of a white and European race permit political and educational discourse. In addition, the marginalization and confidence of the indigenous people to remote places allowed for the easy invisibility of the mestizo reality, as well as the homogenization or blenching of the now Costa Rican population. The both situation led, on the one hand, to the state promotion of European immigration for land colonization. On the other hand, this led to the enactment of a series of laws discriminating those who could be considered as a member of the African and Chinese races. The first anti-Chinese decree was issued in 1862 and the last one in 1930. Paradoxical, 12 years later, the American magazine Scientific American had reported on the prohibition of Chinese to immigrate to California or Costa Rica by the Qing Emperor Cao Guowan. Regardless of the counterproductive context, legal and illegal Chinese immigration began in Costa Rica. At this conjuncture, the Chinese community, already made up of the first generation Chinese, and management to integrate into civil society, even though it was considered legally undesirable and restrictive by the practice of sentencing rights. In addition, the public sphere of Costa Rican modernity was built upon rejection, control, and racial marginalization. This is seen in the participation of the Chinese in the three spheres of modernity. Well, soon, in 1950s, a new wave of Chinese migration began, but this time from the island of Taiwan. And for 1971, Law 44812 was enacted to benefit the remote Taiwanese residents who were pensioners or rent seekers. At the beginning of the new millennium, policies continued to favor of recognition of Chinese contributions, as evident by the decision of October 2003 to celebrate Chinese Culture Day. But the key event came 4 years later when diplomatic relations were established with the People's Republic of China. The ASEAN giant met in the Central American country, a strategic partner in the region, which was opportunity for cooperation and technological and financial development. Since then, the Sino-Tica Chinese-Costa Rican relationship has materialized in the creation of the Confucius Institute at the University of Costa Rica in 2009, the constant exchange of scholars, visits by business groups, the Chinese donation of police patrols, and the reactivation of Chinese immigration to the country. Furthermore, the free trade agreement in 2011 established a negative trade balance for Costa Rica so far. And it did symbol the construction of fully financed by the Chinese government new national stadium inaugurated in 2011, nurtured the identity of the entire people. Nationalism in Costa Rica was part of a Latin American conjuncture in the creation of nation-states during the second half of the 19th century and the early 20th century. From the definition of borders, the proclamation of the Republic, the making of symbols and songbook for patriotic countries, the invention of the national heroes and institutions, all while constructing an inclusive modernity element of Catholic religiousness. This has passed into the exaltation of sportsmen and women with international successes or outstanding public figures. For example, the Chinese descendant and astronaut Franklin Chan Diaz. A symbol par excellence of the Costa Rica culture from the 20th century to the 21st century. Therefore, among the national sports, football has become on the national banners. In that sense, the National Stadium of Costa Rica, where the battle cries, "Ticos, ticos, ticos," and the national Alden are sung with soft stretch, is like a temple of redemption and the propitiation of the true social problems of the country. So, what better gift will China have been? In 2009, the cornerstone was laid for the construction of the new national stadium that began at a cost of 100 million US dollars, financed entirely by the China government. In the face of this demonstration of China cultural cooperation policy, Costa Rican President Costa did not hesitate to affirm that it is about building something that reflects the kind of Costa Rica we want. That Costa Rica of the future is the reflection of this national stadium. China's greatest gift is not this stadium, but it is his friendship. Friendship with whom? This is the problem that still needs further investigation, since over the years, many of the intentions of the power groups represented by demagogue Arias government came to light. Finally, the new National Stadium of Costa Rica was finished. Cultural events, concerts, fireworks, political speeches, religious blessings, patriotic tools to Costa Rican national identity, and of course, a football game between Costa Rica and China's national teams. All added nuance to the inauguration activities. And then, through the disciple of Arias, President Arias, and at the time President of the country, Laura Chinchilla, the figure of the former president was praised. I will congratulate with him, President Arias, in the name of all Costa Ricans, and I will thank him for his great gift that he, together with the Chinese government, made to Costa Rica. How much of the $100 million were donated by Arias? And of course, the workers who died were not remembered for this work. Nor was it sought to vindicate the marginalization, Costa Rican Chinese community. The National Stadium of Costa Rica stands out of one of the most imposing structures in the central valley of the country, a symbol of pride and the national cultural identity and relations with a power that really functions at the kingdom of the center. However, deep within the widespread social imaginary, demagogy, patriotic rituals, and many silence lies hidden a real economic and geopolitical interest. An identity game orchestrated by one who also knew how to take advantage of the global problems of historical memory by institutionalizing the myth of Costa Rica centennial democracy. Next. Apart from all this, another populist and neoliberal Costa Rican, the mayor of the capital, Johnny Araya, had the idea that in gratitude for the new cathedral of football invented in the Josefina metropolis, why not build a Chinatown in the style of New York or San Francisco? The Chinese neighborhoods reproduce particular forms of transnational communities and define racial division of the host societies. In the same way, they function as spaces for the integration of local and foreign ethnic networks, constructing hegemonic and national identities through time and space. However, when a Chinatown is invented overnight in a very desired place of the small Central American city, the absence of these fundamental urban characteristics at global levels leads to search for the salvation of experiment from a game of identities. What happens when a Chinatown is invented without Chinese in historical anti-Chinese country? The first problem of the Chinatown project in San Jose, Costa Rican capital, had to do with its origin. The idea was born from above, proposed by the mayor of the capital city and endorsed by the ruling political class. Formally, this was presented in 2009 as part of the program Regeneration and Repopulation of the 4 central districts of the Canton of San Jose, and obtained a collaboration from the China government with $1 million, which was added to the contribution of the municipality of about half of that figure. The neighborhood officially opened in December 2012. In fact, in his apology for the project, after being criticized as a China without Chinese border, Araya, the mayor of the capital of Costa Rica, argued that once born from immigration, argued that Costa Rica was born from immigration and a mixture of ethnicities and cultures. Costa Rican owe it to the many generations of citizens of Chinese origin who have made an enormous contribution to the history and tradition that define the identity and idiosincrasy of our land. About these words, nothing can be criticized. However, its national identity makes invisible the contribution of the Chinese, who continue to be represented as an other in relation to the Costa Rican cultural being. This last situation, apparently shared by Araya, can only be told of the title of the speech from which the previous text was extracted: Chinos y costarricenses en el barrio chino. If the project for the Chinatown of San Jose had been a material homage and dissimulation of these ethnic groups, the proposal of the writer and artist Otto Apuy, a Costa Rican of Chinese descent, about a museum of Chinese immigration would have received some attention. The great struggle, sacrifice, and example on pioneer countrymen, their integration to the peoples, their singular nature and criollo cannot remain anonymous. An historical museum is equal to the Chinatown bill, or it would be easier for the municipal government to locate the statue of Confucius between the monument to Carlos Gardel, the seat figure of John Lennon, or the bust of Uruguayan hero Jose Gervasio Artigas. On the other hand, paradoxical, Araya's plans to establish the identities beside Chinese and Costa Rican civil society express concern about how this neighborhood could rather have a positive effect. This could be in two particular cases. The first one was presented when the ONG showed concern about the possible encroachment of the urban landscape, of which two buildings of Costa Rican architectural historical heritage form: the Catholic Temple of Nuestra Señora de la Soledad and Casa de San Pancracio. Catholic architecture and religion in this first scenario. Secondly, a series of demonstrations were held because the Chinatown will be located, and was eventually located, on the historic Paseo de los Estudiantes, where in 1919 a group of high school students demonstrated against the dictatorship of Federico Dino. This situation has been represented as foreign invasion of this historical territory, a kind of symbolic transgression of the collective memory and socialist struggles, and attempt to promote the oblivion of the past. Next, please. This is the stadium. Next, the date of the inauguration, with the two presidents of Costa Rica, a representative of the Chinese government. The next one. Next peak. The next one. The mayor of the capital of Costa Rica, with his project of a Chinatown. Next one. Chinatown, the last one, part of the protest about the place that the mayor chose to construct the Chinatown. And to finish, a conclusion. The National Stadium of Costa Rica, the Chinatown San Jose function as contemporary laboratory for the global debate of national identities and Martínez others. The vulnerability of the modernity, and especially the opportunities for relations cooperation with the growing China, are pertinent. In this sense, for Costa Rican political demagogues, it seems that we were in a period where large buildings, regardless of the origin of their foundings, and as long as they honor Chinese culture, will allow for a desired achievement. Both projects were apparently conceived as part of a global dynamic of public and private initiative aimed at the accommodation of the culture and the industrialization of groups. This Costa Rican political class considers that the history of Chinese integration in the country is a sufficient argument to demand the material and symbolic health of contemporary China. And maybe they are right. The global problems of historical memory and the strong interest of the market and consumption perfectly contextualize the development of the cases analysis here. In Costa Rica, the national Chinese culture was institutionalized, but the Asian giant as a great world power. However, whoever has Chinese phenotypic traits, even he speaks Spanish, was born in the country as well as his parents and grandparents, is Catholic, and loves with all his heart the soccer national team, they will be always a Chinese and a owner. Thank you.
Well, our last contributor is Professor Hong Kang here. It's a university. We'll talk about branded spatiality, traumatized spatiality, the production of Chinese urbanized life.
Okay, thank you for your patience in advance. Seems like I'm the only Chinese to be presenting today. So I'm going to present about local geographies and how they are related to the changing identity of not all Chinese cities, but inland Chinese cities. And probably a bigger theoretical and real-world context is the global urban trend of gentrification. That's pretty much my context. So I guess most of the important things that I want to talk about today have already been included in the title. So I'd like to spend a few more minutes explaining some of the crucial elements of my research. My research has three dimensions, or aspects, whatever you want to call them. And the first dimension is the island. And but it's not any island. In fact, what I'm going to focus on is a typical river island in an inland Chinese city that is, relatively speaking, economically backwards, which brings us to the second dimension, which is the urban dimension of my research. River islands are usually characterized by their closed ecosystem, smallness, insularity, which makes them easily manageable and exploitable by the municipality to serve the purposes of identity constructions and reconstructions. Particularly so when it comes to the exploitation of these ecological and cultural resources for touristic development. During the past few years, the exploitation of ecological and cultural resources of small river islands for touristic development becomes particularly intense in lower tier Chinese inland cities because it is a shortcut through which some officials say the cities can realize economic development in an alternative way and transform the cultural identity of these cities that during the past 20 years or so have always practiced a kind of urbanism that stresses economy over environment, physicality over culture, and progress over introspection, and probably the future of the past. This is the Chinese dimension of my research, and my data come from many sources, some of them from local official newspapers, and the chronicles, and some of them from personal writings on social medias, and also some from academic research from a wide range of disciplines, so I won't elaborate on them. And also there's a very crucial part of my data, which is the empirical part, which means interviews conducted during my field trips and some personal observation during my field trips. So in a way, I have adopted a cultural approach in treating the island and as a particular river island in Chinese cities. So my purpose is trying to bring out the spatial and the temporal nuances of these urban landscapes. Please, next one. To begin with, I'd like to show you some three pictures. The first one is the one that I took last month during my field trips. This is me standing in along the western bank of this important local river. And this is a river, a main river in the Hunan province. It's one of the major tributaries of the Yangtze. This is where I'm standing. And the next one I'd like to show you is a map from the Ming Dynasty, which is probably in Western Canada. It's the 16th century. And the island is somewhere probably around here, but it's not very clearly indicated. And also because this map is kind of ancient, so it's one-dimensional, does not really correspond to our modern geographical perceptions and imaginations. So I'd like to show you a second map. Okay, and this is one in the 18th century, which is in the Qing Dynasty. And in this picture, you can see very clearly, this is the island that I'm going to talk about. And also this one is closer to our modern imagination. Please, next one. And my presentation today has 4 parts. In the first part, I'm going to introduce very briefly my research background and some of my major concerns and theoretical inspirations and methodologies. And in the second part, I'll probably not skip this part. I'll choose some of the most important. I'll let you have a glimpse of the bigger picture by looking at my structure of the first approach. And then I'd like to share with you one part. I won't go into too much theoretical speculation. I'd like to share with you, okay, this one. I'd like to show you a part that is more empirically informed, which means this is a narrative part that is based on my personal and intense interviews with island residents. And in the last part, if I still have time, I'd like to show some pictures. I have categorized these pictures purposefully into 3 categories, each reflecting a particular island urban landscape. Okay, and that's the agenda. The next one, please. I'll probably will skip this one. Sorry. This is the one. Next one. Sorry. Okay, here's the empirical background. My research is about a city that is located in the hinterland of central South China. And this city is remote from the eastern and southern coastal regions, where since the end of the Cultural Revolution is where the economy is, where the culture is, and also where the spotlight is. And in particular, we're looking into the city of Kellogg, which is a very small city in Hunan province, through the microcosmic lens of one of these islands. The name of the island is called Dongzhou Island. Our story unfolds as the city refines the desolate river island with historical significance in the new context of urban gentrification. They try to project a contemporary urbanism that somehow integrates 3 urban functions: public archive, ecological museum, and also a modern leisure haven. Because that's the real world context. Please, next one. And post-domestic literature, all fall in the domain of ecology and other related inquiries, such as some interdisciplinary studies between tourism and ecology. And to generalize a little bit, probably they treat the island as a fossilized object of cold scientific assessments. So my research is kind of a critical response to this tendency. So in this research, I try to adopt a cultural approach. Next one. So there are a few arguments. They're very primitive, and I'm sure they could be revised in the future. So I'm here to present in the pure written form. So my first argument is that with the introduction of the municipality-led touristic development, the island is subjected to a series of cultural processes. And there are 2 dominant ones, and one that is less obvious. The 2 dominant ones is what I call branding and traumatizing. The last one is individual memorizing. A little bit more detail. While branding is practiced by the municipality with relatively clear geographical imaginaries, the island's semantic coherence is disrupted by the more nuanced process of traumatization. And traumatization is natural to assume that usually comes from the civil society, but actually it's not. Official propaganda also use these kind of traumatizing strategies, but to serve different purposes, and also scholars. Okay. So these are the 2 obvious processes, and these 2 dominant cultural processes, the meaning of this production, are further complicated in the individual geographies, in the imagination, the memory of the island as a lead space. The next one, please. And my second argument is that despite the different meaning makings of the above-mentioned 3 cultural processes, I think they follow a common trajectory. They put the island in focus, while at the same time, the lose sight of its groundedness in urban environments. So with this in mind, in the last section of my paper, I try to shift away from the analytic approach above in examining island spatiality towards a more critical reflection on the relational geographies of Dongzhou Island. So I'm trying to engage with a theoretical paradox that is much discussed in the fields of human geography and cultural anthropology. So I won't go into detail. This is focus locus. And my third argument is that in this section, based on my own field observation and probably a little bit of theorization, I try to examine the island, and not just the island, but related surrounding urban environments as an ensemble of urban landscapes that are characterized by differentiation and temporalization. So my conclusion with this point is that the ecocultural touristic deployment of the island provides the lower tier Chinese inland cities with the opportunity to reorient its trajectory of urbanization and also carries significant difficulties. So, and all these problems are not something that is unique to China and inland cities. And as I said in the beginning, it's probably linked to a bigger global trend of urban gentrification. But of course, the local situations are a little bit different. In the Western society, if I'm not mistaken, gentrification usually is a process that somehow takes place in a working class community or in a city town, city like that. But in China, gentrification during the past 10 years is a process that is taking place probably mostly in the rural-urban junctures or former suburban areas. Okay, the next one, please. This is what I hope my research could achieve. I'll probably skip this one. Okay, now I would like to share you with you guys a certain part of my research. And this is a narrative part from part of my research, which is based on an interview that I conducted with a former island resident. So I'm going to read it. Apart from being a friendly space and a traumatized space, Dongzhou Island has also been a lived space for its residents. It's difficult to retrieve its lived realities since all the residents had been displaced and relocated to the landed town by 2013, following the municipal government's plan to overhaul the island for touristic development. One way to approach this lost island life is through islanders' memories. But it's necessary to bear in mind that a memory-based reconstruction of islands' lived realities through interviews does not produce a lived reality in the objectivist sense, but the realm of what some scholars call individual geographies. Human geography sees memories as an inherently geographical activity. Geographical places are regarded as warehouses, storing and evoking personal and collective memories that emerge as bodily experiences of being in and moving through space, while the process of branding and traumatizing produce relatively clear meaning for the islands. As a memorized lived space for the islanders, Dongzhou is a place marked by the ambivalence of meaning. Through in-depth semi-structured interviews, it is found that the island is both a space to escape from and an Eden that is lost. One respondent recounted her childhood memory of the island in the 1960s and 1970s as a land of deprivation, where drinking water had to be procured through well sinking, and of poverty, where the only ways to escape were through education and communist-style state-organized recruitment factories. The differentiated status of the island is also reflected in linguistic terms. When asked what word Dongzhou resident had for the landed main town of Hengyang, the respondent unhesitatingly identified the island as a suburban area that is, though slightly better than the countryside, is significantly inferior to what Chinese call, what local people call shili, which literally in English means probably the city inside or inner city, but something close to that. And on the other hand, the 62-year-old respondent became obviously nostalgic as she reflected on the lost island life. Having succeeded in becoming a head nurse in a major local hospital, she is regarded as an example of islanders that have made it in comparison with her peers. During the latter part of the interview, she unconsciously dwelled on the good old days, reminiscent of clear air, cool summer, in comparison with that of the scorching landed town, the communal atmosphere, the self-sufficient agrarian life, relying on vegetable growing and fishing, and everyday activities, all mediated by the river. One noteworthy incident is that when asked the question, I asked the question, what major events can you recollect about an island? Without even the slightest effort of mind searching, she pinpointed 2 floods in 1968 and 1976, when the once supposedly immune Miracle Island was submerged with only rooftops visible. Both floods were recorded, I checked later, in the official chronicle of local hydraulic engineering. So having assessed the risks of keeping the island populated, the local government tried to persuade some of the residents to ditch the island for good and move permanently on land in public housings. That was in the 1970s, in the Mao Zedong's era. And however, despite the physical impact of the disaster and the government's goodwill to save them, the islanders insisted on staying on the island because for them, landed life insulated from the river was simply not an option. Another noteworthy account bearing witness to her persistent island identification is her retelling of how she used her personal connections at the hospital to give extra favors to her usually poor fellow islanders who came to seek medical help because she felt these people were closer to her than people from Shuli, which means the landed town. One particular islander that came to seek help was remembered by her as having blown off both of his hands in dynamite fishing, which is a very violent practice that has been very common for local people living near the river until it was more tightly monitored and controlled in the late 1990s. As for developing tourism for the island, she thought positively about it, as long as the practice could bring economic gains to islanders, who in that case would not have to leave the island and seek what the local people call small jobs, usually referred to manual labor in infrastructure building and low-profit small retailing, and business like that. The welcoming attitude towards tourism on the island was shared by many islanders, if not all. As one local village official, upon hearing the news of the government's touristic initiative, organized the community to plant more peach trees in order to restore the peach blossom landscape that is much foregrounded in official branding of tourism. However, as it turned out that the government was aiming at a complete and radical transformation of the island based on total relocation of its residents rather than a partial and moderate development that will not significantly change the island lives, the respondent expressed skeptical feelings similar to those found in some online posts. So my conclusion with this part is, if the ambivalent attitude towards the island above mentioned is not an isolated individual case, it is probably symptomatic of the Chinese urban-rural dialectic in general that follow a path of modernity in which its material promises are embraced, while its cultural and political consequences have been skepticism. That's the conclusion of this part. Now, if you have the next page, this is one of the major sections of my draft, so I'm glad to share a little more detail with you. And now what you can see is the last part. The part of it constitutes a frame description of the urban landscape. Sorry. Not just on the island, but around the island region. This part is informed by my field observations. I have divided the ensemble of areas centering around the island into 3 distinct types of urban landscapes. In the middle of the river is the island. I call it a manufactured enclave that tries so hard to look antique that it looks to me almost surreal. On the east side of the river is a half-demolished village that is in transition from the rural to the urban, and from the past to the future. This area is actually symptomatic of China's urban development as a whole, because it holds in one single landscape both the past and the future. Traces of the past can be glimpsed in the half-demolished village. I'm going to show you pictures later. Stepping on the west side of the river, you get the feeling that one is finally back to the city, because you see Riverside Boulevard mashing together Western public spatial features, traditional Chinese iconicities, and communist ideological publicities. You see rows of expensive residential neighborhoods with names, very pompous names, pattering the vision of the luxurious waterfront living styles such as the King's Domain, Golden Shore, names like that. and a lot more urban facilities. This constitutes a version of urbanism, crystallized through more than a decade of suburban renewal carried out by the city of Hanyang, and probably to some extent lower-tier mainland Chinese cities in general. So this is a model of urban development with high-end real estate industry as its vanguard. Islands and waterfront views, once with connotation of rurality, underdevelopment, are deployed as ecological and cultural resources in order to push property price upwards. And obviously, this is a Chinese variety of the global urban trend of gentrification, which, despite its economic gains, is problematic in at least three aspects. So the first trend, what I think has to do with it's more philosophical, has to do with the ecology as a kind of global ideology. And the second track has to do with economic justice. And the last one is the cultural issue of what are the nature of local histories? How do we represent them? Are there any ethical way or unethical way to represent local history, especially during urban development? That's all. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation with some photos taken during my field trips. As I said, I've categorized these photos into three particular types, and each corresponding to a distinct urban landscape that is analyzed in certain parts of my research. Okay, please, next one. This is one of the photos that I took during my field trip. I'm standing here on the eastern side of the river, looking across to the island. The island is still under construction. Actually, I was not allowed to go on the island to take photographs, but it happens that one of the guys in charge of the construction of the island happened to be my schoolmates from the kindergarten. So I was allowed to go to the island. Yeah. So this, you can see that this is small boats. Yeah. Okay. Okay, this one is small boats. This is a sign of the past, because probably in the 1980s and 1990s, these boats were used by local people, villagers on the lands, or also islanders, to use this one to do small businesses, use as ferries. It was illegal to the government, but somehow they did it. Okay, the next one. This is a new bridge that is under construction. This is actually very meaningful, because in the past, the eastern side of the town is actually underdeveloped. It's suburban, it's rural. But with the building of this bridge, there are going to come along a lot of related infrastructure, such as mega parking lots, some fancy hotels, restaurants, stuff like that. And one of the villagers told me that in about 5 years, this part of this side of the river is going to be more developed than the other side. And the other side has always been more urbanized and more modern, stuff like that. Okay, next one. And this is a village looking right across to the island. This is an urban ruin. Most of the houses have been uninhabited, but there are still a few families that try to stay on because they are not satisfied with the compensation program by the government. Okay. Okay, this is very typical Chinese. Okay, the red letter here said house to be demolished. So, and this is me looking into one of the roof of one of the abandoned farmhouses. Next one. This is abandoned farming tractor. And can you guys guess what this is? Flowers. This is a traditional Chinese ritual flowers to commemorate the dead. So that's why people are living in the house, and when the family member die, they bury the family members just right in front of the how do you say that in English, front yard. And a part of these kind of graves, as I did my field trip, they have been removed and relocated to another place, but some villages, they were not satisfied with the money, because for a relocation of one of these kind of tombs, the government will compensate for about 2,500 RMB, which is roughly a little bit less than $200. Yeah, so that's the price they pay you if you are willing to move one of these family graves to another part of the town. Next one. Again, this is the graves, on the graves. This is me on the bridge. I'm stepping onto the island. I'm going to show you more pictures about the island. This is very meaningful because this looks something very traditional Chinese. It was modeled on the ancient academy that was in the 18th century, but it was totally manufactured because like 5 years ago I visited this spot it was a very rather pitiable sight. And this reflects a general situation in China that for the past 10 years, both the people and the government, they realized that historical resources are very important. But the problem is that much of these historical resources have already been, forgotten and neglected. So that's one of the symptoms. There are more pictures, but I guess that's it. I'll jump right to the conclusion, if you will, the last page. I can do it myself. I want to go with these more pictures. Okay, please allow me to read my conclusion. Throughout the chapter, I have tried to work out the complexities of urban spatiality through a very small perspective, which is the island and its urban surroundings. It is found that far from being mere physicality, urban space is overdetermined, both spatially and temporally. Of the various dimensions of urban space examined in our case study, some of them are imposed from top down, while others reflect aspirations from bottom up. And some of them exist in visible forms, whereas others constitute world of values and beliefs. And some of them are future-oriented, whereas others are whispers with the dead, the phantoms of the past. The sometimes predominance of one dimension over others says less about the ontological status of urban spatiality than about one's inability, often clouded by myth and ideologies, to see it in ways that are both liberated and liberating. Okay, that's all my presentation.